The stage lights dimmed slightly as the host called out the next act. 5 boys stepped forward from backstage, their movements careful, almost hesitant, as if they were afraid to take up too much space. They looked like any ordinary Filipino boys you might pass on a quiet street: simple hairstyles, neatly pressed but inexpensive clothes, shoes polished just enough to look respectful. No flashy confidence. No dramatic poses. Just nervous smiles and tightly clasped hands. The audience offered polite applause, the kind given out of habit rather than excitement. A few people leaned back in their seats, already preparing themselves for something forgettable. Someone in the crowd whispered, "They look so young." Another shrugged, unimpressed. At the judges' table, Simon Cowell barely glanced up from his notes. He'd seen this before, countless hopefuls with big dreams and little chance. His expression remained neutral, almost bored, as he studied them briefly. 5 boys. A group. Singing. Nothing about them screamed star material. "So, tell me," Simon finally said, his voice calm but distant, "who are you?" The boys exchanged quick glances before one of them stepped forward. His voice trembled just slightly as he introduced the group and explained where they were from. He spoke about long bus rides to rehearsals, about practicing after school, about families watching from thousands of miles away. As he talked, the others nodded silently, eyes shining under the bright stage lights. Simon listened, arms crossed, unreadable. The story was familiar: hard work, sacrifice, hope. Admirable, yes. Shocking. Not yet. The room settled into a quiet pause. This was the moment where expectations were set low, where no one, least of all Simon Cowell, suspected that everything was about to change. A hush settled over the theater as the introductions ended. The boys stood shoulder to shoulder, hands clasped in front of them, trying to steady their breathing. The stage suddenly felt much larger than it had a moment ago. From the audience, they could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes judging them before a single note had been sung. Simon leaned forward slightly, tapping his pen against the desk. "So," he said, his tone sharp but controlled, "why do you think you deserve to be here?" The question landed heavily. For a split second, none of the boys spoke. Then the tallest one cleared his throat. "Sir," he began, carefully choosing his words, "we don't think we're better than anyone else. We just love singing. It's what keeps us going." A faint murmur rippled through the audience. Some smiled politely. Others exchanged doubtful looks. Love for singing was nice, but this was a competition that crushed dreams as often as it created them. Another judge tilted her head. "Have you performed on big stages before?" The boys shook their heads. "Only school events," one of them admitted softly. "Sometimes weddings. Sometimes just for our neighbors." A few quiet laughs slipped out from the crowd, not cruel, but skeptical. The kind that said this might not end well. Simon raised an eyebrow, his expression unconvinced. He'd heard similar answers thousands of times. Raw talent was rare. Hope was not. The youngest boy shifted nervously, gripping his sleeve. "If we win," he added suddenly, "we want to help our families. They believe in us even when we doubt ourselves." For a moment, there was silence. Even Simon paused, studying their faces, earnest, anxious, completely exposed under the lights. Still, experience told him emotion alone wasn't enough. "All right," Simon finally said, leaning back. "Let's hear what you've got." The music cue hadn't even started yet, but the doubt hung thick in the air. No one expected magic. No one was prepared for it either. The backing track began softly, a simple piano melody floating through the theater. The boys closed their eyes for just a second, as if drawing strength from somewhere deep inside. The audience leaned in slightly, not with excitement, but with cautious curiosity. Then the first note was sung. It didn't shout. It didn't try to impress. It soared, clear, controlled, and filled with a quiet emotion that instantly cut through the room. Heads lifted. A few people blinked, surprised by what they were hearing. Simon's pen stopped mid-tap. The second voice joined in, smooth and perfectly timed, wrapping around the first like it belonged there. The harmony felt natural, effortless, as if these boys had been singing together their entire lives, which, in truth, they had. The sound grew richer, deeper, pulling the audience into something unexpectedly beautiful. By the time the third voice entered, the room had completely changed. Skepticism faded into stunned silence. A woman in the front row pressed a hand to her chest. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The boys stood still, but their voices moved, rising and falling with purpose, carrying stories of struggle, hope, and longing in every note. Simon leaned forward slowly, eyes fixed on the stage. His expression shifted from doubt to disbelief. This wasn't just technically good singing. This was feeling. The kind that couldn't be taught, only lived. As the chorus approached, all 5 voices blended together, powerful yet perfectly balanced. The sound filled every corner of the theater, vibrating through the seats, through the hearts of everyone listening. Goosebumps rippled across the crowd. This was the moment, the one that separated ordinary auditions from unforgettable ones. And as the boys sang on, it became clear that nothing about this performance was ordinary anymore. The chorus hit like a wave. All 5 voices rose together, strong and fearless now, their earlier nerves completely gone. The harmonies locked in perfectly, filling the theater with a sound that felt larger than the stage itself. It wasn't just loud, it was powerful, controlled, and deeply emotional. The audience sat frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. Simon's eyes widened. He didn't blink. He didn't move. For perhaps the first time that day, he looked genuinely shaken. This was not what he had prepared for. This was not what he had expected from 5 boys who had walked in looking so ordinary. As the song continued, the boys poured everything into it. One stepped forward for a brief solo, his voice cracking slightly, not from weakness, but from emotion. Instead of hurting the performance, it made it real. A judge covered her mouth. Another slowly shook his head in amazement. In the audience, tears began to fall. A father squeezed his daughter's hand. A woman silently mouthed the lyrics as if they belonged to her own story. Phones were forgotten. Breathing slowed. The entire room was listening, not just with ears, but with hearts. Then came the final note. It stretched high and pure, hanging in the air like it refused to leave. When it finally faded, there was no immediate applause. Just silence. Thick. Heavy. Sacred. The boys stood still, chests rising and falling, unsure if they had done enough. For a brief, terrifying moment, they thought maybe something had gone wrong. Then Simon exhaled slowly, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. That silence, more powerful than any standing ovation, said everything. The room knew it had just witnessed something special. The silence broke suddenly as Simon pushed his chair back and stood up. The movement alone sent a ripple through the audience. He rarely stood. When he did, it meant something. The boys stiffened, hearts pounding. They watched him closely, trying to read his face, but it was impossible. Simon took a moment before speaking, as if choosing his words carefully. "I'll be honest with you," he began, his voice calm but serious. "When you walked out here, I didn't expect much." A few nervous smiles flickered across the boys' faces. "You looked like nice kids with a nice story." The audience murmured softly. "But then you opened your mouths," Simon continued, pointing toward the stage, "and everything changed." He paused, letting the words sink in. That wasn't just singing. That was connection. That was emotion. That was truth. One of the boys swallowed hard, eyes shining. Simon leaned forward. "You reminded me why this show exists. Not for perfection, but for moments that stop time. And you did exactly that. The crowd erupted into applause, rising to their feet. Cheers echoed through the theater, louder than anything that had come before. The boys looked at one another, stunned, hands covering their mouths. One wiped away tears, no longer able to hold them back. "Yes," Simon said firmly. "From me." The other judges followed without hesitation. "Yes. Absolutely yes. 100% yes. 5 yes." The boys broke down, hugging each other tightly at the center of the stage. Somewhere far away, families were cheering in living rooms, eyes wet with pride. They had walked in as ordinary Filipino boys with a simple dream. They walked off the stage as something else entirely. A moment the world would remember.